I had the good fortune to back a Kickstarter last year for a graphic novel titled An Unlikely Refugee, the Story of a Python Named George, by Max and MORROW DOWDLE. I had met Max at a comic convention a few years prior, and enjoyed his debut graphic novel, Shattered with Curve of Horn, so I was pleased to see he was working on a new book. An Unlikely Refugee is a unique and charming biopic of a Burmese python named George, who was rescued by a U.S. Special Forces soldier and brought from Vietnam to Raleigh, North Carolina in 1964. George, who was actually a female snake, became the star exhibit at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences until her death in 1989. At first, there may not seem to be much of a story to George, other than being a quirky piece of local history for North Carolina residents, but Max and MORROW are able to take George's unique situation and infuse it with Vietnamese religion, folklore, and mythology to create a poetic interpretation of the python's life. The story is told completely from George's point of view. We see the effects of war and human conflict juxtaposed against the natural life and death struggles of jungle animals. The human characters and situations are familiar, but from a distanced, almost alien perspective. George's narration is somber and earnest, befitting a cold-blooded reptile, which gives the storytelling a mythic, folklore flavor. If you removed the visual context and modern-day imagery and just read the text, it could pass for a centuries-old fable. The art is beautifully rendered, with a striking use of color that blends mundane reality with grand mythology. Max and MORROW were deliberate in matching the artistic design of the book with the sincere tone of the text. There is no cartooning in the art. Instead, the animals and settings are depicted realistically, which only enhances the surreal and fantastic imagery that appears throughout the book. Moreover, we never see a human face fully depicted, which makes it easier for readers to separate their own humanity from the events presented in the story and draws us further into George's world. In the afterword, the Dowdles state that there is no socio-political agenda intended for An Unlikely Refugee. Despite dealing with heavy subject matter such as war and the effects on surrounding ecosystems, they succeed in not letting the story get bogged down in overt messaging. Instead, they elegantly present the history of George with subtle yet powerful imagery that allows the reader to understand the events as they happened, yet still bring their own meaning to it. Ultimately, the Dowdles were able to take a relatively straightforward story about a jungle snake turned museum exhibit and present a subtly profound and poetic examination of the nature of life, death, and the spiritual journey between and beyond. This is a book that is accessible to children and adults alike, and I would recommend it to both.